right, here's our Math 1030 Module 7, collecting data. Let's read about why we would want to learn this stuff. Like most people, you're probably bombarded with numerous claims throughout your day in advertising, studies, and even sports. Statistics provides the tools you need in order to understand the basics of research studies and help you interpret these claims. In this module, we will study how statistics is used to learn from data, draw conclusions, and make informed decisions. Okay, so there's our objectives. Let's go ahead and hit this vocabulary. Now, if you watch the first video that's provided to you, the vocabulary is intermixed with some, so basically in these notes, the first and second pages go with the first video. So I'm just going to kind of go through in order, but if you watch the video from our class on YouTube, then it kind of goes back and forth between the vocabulary and the different examples on the second page. Okay, so this first word here is population, and that is the group the collected data is intended to describe. Now, sometimes because of what we call bias, sometimes the data doesn't actually describe the actual population, so the population of the data becomes something different than what we wanted it to be. So sometimes the population we want to have is called the target population because that's what we're trying to target, and occasionally we get off the mark because of something that's been designed wrong or collected wrong. Okay. Now, the word parameter, you're not really going to use that very often in this case, because a parameter refers to a value, average, percentage, etc., calculated using data from the entire population. Now, it's very unlikely that you're going to actually collect data from your entire population, depending on what the population is. So this is seldom used because it's time-consuming and expensive. Now, sometimes we do survey an entire population, and when that happens, that is called a census. Here in the U.S., those census happen every 10 years. So we just had one in 2020, which has shown the growth of different states and reallocated the number of representatives in each state. And I was just reading an article about that because technically Utah is like the largest growing state in the whole United States, the highest percentage. However, not enough growth at this point to add another representative to the House of Representatives. So, not anymore. We did have cheap housing, and now the droves of people coming here have caused housing prices to skyrocket. Okay. A sample is a smaller subgroup or subset of the entire population, ideally one that is fairly representative of the whole population. So you know how we have a target population, we want our sample to be such that it will represent that target population so that our population and our target population are basically the same thing. We get what we want. Okay, a value, average, percentage, etc., calculated using the data from a sample, that is called a statistic. And then pieces of information can be grouped in two different ways. Pieces of information that allow us to classify the objects under investigation into various groupings are known as categorical data, or sometimes we can call that qualitative. So either word means the same thing. So for example, qualitative data might be something like favorite movies, you know, favorite things. Okay, so favorites, that would be qualitative, right? You could put it into groups, right? But another thing that might actually you would be able to use for groupings is something like a zip code, right? Because that groups people together into certain locations where they live. However, zip codes is a number. It's not a number, though, that we're going to take different zip codes and find the average of, right? So that is why, even though it's a number, it fits into categorical or qualitative, because an average zip code would not be meaningful, okay? Calculations with zip codes would not be meaningful. So that's kind of important to note before we get to the next category, which is quantitative. I have an extra little dot there that I don't want, so I'm going to get rid of it. Okay. Hopefully you can read my handwriting. All right, moving on. So the next category of data that we can collect is called quantitative, which actually you might have noticed in the name of this class. Quantitative refers to numbers, and so it's kind of a fancy word used for mathematics classes when you're getting credit for those in college. And I can't talk to you and spell this word at the same time. Quantitative, responses that are numerical in nature with which we can perform meaningful arithmetic calculations. So example, we could calculate averages from things like age, weight. These are just like some thrown out examples from the videos. Commute time, like how long it takes people to get to and from where they're going. We could calculate temperatures, right? Any other ideas you guys can think of you want to add to this list? I mean, there's a million different things we could collect number data for, right? And then calculate averages and things like that. Okay. The last thing I'm going to throw in here, a sample has this if it does not accurately represent the population, and that's something we're going to spend a whole page talking about in this unit, and that is bias. So yeah, so our goal is that our study that we create when we collect data is not going to have bias, otherwise that will skew our data and not make our statistics very accurate. So something to be aware of. Okay, any questions on any of these vocabulary words, anything you might have missed, understanding or wanting to know more about before we move on?